I'm coming up on the train running through, the freight train. We're in Illinois. We're a hub. And they should try to run all the logistical trains, as many as possible, through the busiest urban centers like Chicago or other busy urban centers in the state of Illinois at night. So trying to get them through by 6 a.m., 7 a.m., starting from, say, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So through that window of 9 hours, trying to get the majority of those freight trains scheduled to move through the urban centers like the city of Chicago. This would free up congestion and during the heavier daylight hours. So again, trying to move these through that 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. is appropriate. So this train going through right now holds up very little traffic, making it very functional. But they'd have to schedule out the logistics. And now with modern GPS, global positioning of the train, they can govern speed to make sure it clears a certain area at a certain time. And they need to take into account unloading and offloading of the train and how long it takes at each stop. So they must record, just like a container ship, when it comes into a dock or a plane, the airlines, they need to record the unloading and offloading of passengers, or FedEx, the unloading and offloading of cargo. How long from the time it lands to the gate or to the logistical center it's emptied, and how long it takes to fill it back up and do inspections and put it back in the air. It's the same way with cargo ships. How long they're in each port, how long do they sit, like at Panama, waiting to go through the canal? How long does it take to go through the canal? And then once it reaches the port, how long does it take to empty the cargo? How long does it take to put new cargo on? And then how long for the ship to leave port? So you have to have the turnaround times. And so this is with freight trains as well. So as it moves through the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois, if it makes any stops, how long does it wait at those stops? How long does it take for cargo to be emptied and cargo to be loaded? And then it leaves the station. So you can get an overall just-in-time logistical system down to a T. It's the same way with cargo ships. So if ports are improving their unloading and offloading, then turnaround time's faster. And it's the same thing with cruise ships and all of that. How long do they sit idle for? So you're trying to get into this just-in-time thing where you're able to predict within a short window when a good or person will show up. So from the time of departure to the time of arrival. So they never talk about that. When a passenger plane lands in O'Hare, for the different gates, how long does it take a passenger to walk from the gate to get its luggage, a passenger, to the time it exits the facility, the airport, to the vestibules needing to be picked up? So once the plane lands, they don't tell you at this gate it will take the passenger blank amount of time to walk from the gate to the luggage rack. From the luggage rack, it'll take blank to pick up the bag, 5-10 minutes. And then from the luggage rack, they'll be on the outside at the vestibule waiting for pickup. But they need this to determine the flow of people entering and exiting. Once you get into the airport, they never tell you how long it takes to get to your gate. So they don't tell you with the Google GPS, say, how long is the wait in the waiting line at the airport. So when you run the GPS and you're going to the airport, you can type into the Google GPS what airline you're taking and what flight you're on, and it knows exactly where the gate is, and it can tell you the line for security, truly going through security, and it can tell you all that information in real time, working with Midway and O'Hare Airport. And that same security setup for the airlines need to be for trains, planes. I mean, it's already on planes, but needs to trickle down to trains and ships. It's the same type of security. Cruise ships need that. So, and remember, security is both ways, exiting and entering. And I believe people need to go through security as they exit too, making sure they're only leaving with what they came. So, again, I believe just because you do the security in doesn't mean you don't do the security out. And the complete the loop. So it has to be both ways, entering and exiting. We have it when I'm going to go to the CVS now. When I exit, what do? They have security that checks me for if I stole any goods. But they don't have security checking me in. But those sensors that they use that you walk through that are theft sensors can double as metal detectors and weapon detectors. So they don't have to change anything. They just have to update those theft detection systems to do dual purpose to be security. So it automatically puts off a silent alarm if somebody enters with a weapon. Now, the thing that happened in Texas, when you sell guns, and I said this before, you don't give them the bullets. Some guy went to Walmart and he purchased a gun, and then he purchased ammo, and he took the ammo and put it in the gun, and then he did his mass shooting in the Walmart. A gun he didn't own, bullets that he didn't have, they sold it to him in Texas. The guy who was working the counter, who was, I believe, shot, I don't know how many were injured and killed, but they gave him the gun, and then he asked to buy ammo, and they gave him the ammo, and then he loaded the gun, and then he started shooting everybody in the store. So when you sell these weapons in store, well, it's the same thing. I think that happened at the IKEA in Sweden, that they didn't bring the weapons into the store. They took the weapons off the shelf of the store to kill a mother and child in an aisle. So they didn't bring the weapons into the store. They just picked them up in the store because you could grab the knives, which they used, were readily available. So in stores, you have to be careful, because True Value and other stores, because they make the weapons readily available. So a hammer should come in a package, and that package should be secured, and not only tamper-proof, meaning, somebody breaking it out and trying to steal it, those tamper-proof packages have to alert the store that somebody opened the package. So we have to move into a modern era where things need to be put in safety packaging, and that packaging needs to be sealed, and that needs to be sealed with a sensor that tells if it's ripped apart. So you do the RFID chip in the area, and it's like a circuit. If the circuit is weakened, the package is tampered with. So if the RFID chip is weakened, if the package has its RFID transmission weakened, then the package is tampered, or if it's terminated, then the package is tampered. So the RFID chip can double as a tamper-proof system, and if the current is weakened because they opened the package, or the other way, if the current is enhanced, they open the package and there's a sensor inside, and the signal gets stronger, weaker or stronger, it's telling that something's going on with the package. So again, they can use these things to further enhance security. So on the walk through, and I'll show you at the CVS that they can double these things that are for people stealing things coming out. And remember, it's not only the RFID sensor, the metal detector, and everything that detects weapons coming in. Well, they can detect you stealing things coming out. So the metal detector can detect metal, so it registers you with the camera. Its interface when you enter the store, the security system is interfaced with the camera, the AI security. And so when you pass through, it gives you a reading on what you have on your possession when you enter the store, and it identifies you through the camera and links in the reading. And then as you enter the store, it already knows what it scanned you with. And then you can use this at airports as well. The reading coming in and the reading when you leave the airport. You walk through the system and it scans you again as you leave the airport, noticing any changes. Truly. So in what you're carrying. So I know you have shops and you can purchase stuff and everything. But again, airports need to get interlinked in their security systems. So when you get in an airport and you purchase things and you take it on a plane and so on from the airport, and you get off and you leave, again, it needs to interlink this between airports. So security systems need to be networked. And airport security systems aren't networked. And because they're not networked, somebody getting on and getting off, the systems don't talk to each other, and very bad things can happen because the systems aren't networked. And this is where internationally, all these airports, you have to have highly ethical people running these things. And this is the problem when China becomes our enemy. Then all those airports, and you network the system, now the Chinese are our enemy, and this information can be hacked into and reverse hacked and used for not good things. And this is where the United Nations has to stop this shit. And we can't have this. See, the world can't be like before, where you have country actors like Iran and that doing very bad things. The United Nations was created with the subcomponent, the Security Council, to be able to initiate actions like police actions in Korea, where it draws from the Security Council to put troops together to punish a country. So we can't network these systems. So when a plane leaves from Chicago and lands in Dubai, the passengers get off, boom, but they're going to be round trip, and they know with the ticket, and the security system knows with the ticket that it's a round trip ticket, and when they're coming back, and it compared the information of them leaving to the information of them coming back, and it compares bag weights and other things they declare. So again, the security systems have to network. They have to be smarter. They got to talk to each other. And the problem is when we have states that are bad actors, and this was the purpose of the United Nations, to prevent states from becoming bad actors. So we can't have the past. The threat, as they show in James Bond and that, are individual components like Bin Laden. He's not a state actor. Or Al-Qaeda, they weren't state actors. The Taliban, they weren't state actors. Most of these terrorist groups, the Khmer Rouge, are not state actors. These are independent organizations, and they're the threat. Most of the threat comes from non-state actors, and we need to stop Iran from supporting the Hamas or Hezbollah, and this can't happen, and the United Nations has to crack down on them, and the international community. We can't have state-sponsored terrorism, not from North Korea or anyone, and we focus on the greater threat, the individual-sponsored organizations like ISIS. It wasn't a state-sponsored terrorist organization. It was an independently sponsored terrorist organization. And you had individual bad actors funding them, and then bad actors acting with inside of them. And so these are the things that we need to networking, and this is why we need ethical leadership in our countries, United States, and every country, China, it doesn't matter, North Korea. And the UN must mandate this in their charters and actions, that people to be inside the United Nations have to be ethical actors. And if they're not, they need to be removed from the United Nations and isolated by the UN community. Need to be punished. Teaching them to be ethical actors. And so really it's the cartels, the street gangs like MS-13 and many others. These are not state-sponsored actors. These are individual organizations, you call them rogue organizations or whatever, that are the greatest of threat. And so our governments need to be highly ethical, and the United Nations needs to mandate this, that these people have the highest of ethics. So we can do these things, meaning network information, share information, and protect ourselves. But the people at the highest level, and this is why the Bible says, those that are given most have the greatest responsibility, and when they fail, they get punished the most. Because God knows that the greatest threat is those at the high level acting inappropriately. They're the greatest threat to mankind. So those are given the most. If they fail, they get punished the greatest. And this is what people have to understand. And I'll tell you from my own personal life, I've turned down promotions because I wasn't ready to take responsibility. Because when you step up, you're responsible for the well-being of everybody under you. In the military, if you move from a private first class to a private second class, you're responsible for those private first classes. And so when you move up in rank, you take more responsibility for more lives. And so the Bible sees it as you move up, You have the greater ability to do evil, and so you receive the greater punishment. So those at the top burn the worst, and this is what they don't understand. They think they get in power and corruption is going to pay off for them, but in the long term, they're going to suffer greatly. So no, it doesn't pay off, and the Bible tells you. And if you can't handle the responsibility, you're supposed to take a pass. If you can't do your job proficiently, take a pass. Ask to be mentored. Ask to be an assistant manager, not a manager. Ask to be a supervisor and get mentored properly. Step up and become a trainer in a restaurant. But again, so you can get mentored. So there's these steps in progress that you have to take so you become proficient at each stage as you move forward. Anyone who jumps into it doesn't give a shit about anyone else's life. And so my whole life, I worked very hard and took very seriously, like at Platinum Wealth. I used to tell my small group all the time, I'm responsible for David's life and KJ's life. And if things don't go right, then it's my failure. And that's what happened when I got fired. And I failed David and I failed KJ. And I was responsible for them because I took them under my wing. And that's what businesses like CVS and everything don't understand, but corporations like Vanguard and the book Good to Great understand. These companies never lay off employees. Employees make mistakes and get fired. That includes management and CEOs, the board. But what they do is they take in an employee and they take care of the employee. They feel a great sense of responsibility to the employee. Vanguard has never laid off a single employee in its history. It has fired people, and people have left for other places, but they've never laid off an employee. You can only fire yourself through your inefficiencies. So if you allow yourself to become lazy and sloth in that, you can get warnings and eventually be terminated. But they've never laid off. They take it under, and this is why it was great working for them. They take great responsibility and they value human life greatly. And those that are up the food chain value human life through the food chain. So you can't become a mayor or an alderman or a community organizer if you aren't willing to take responsibility for those under you and their happiness and proficiency. And that's what the President of the United States, when he comes into office, he's directly responsible for 340 million people plus U.S. territories, their health, well-being, and happiness. And he has to see it that way, and that this person is responsible for all these people. And if he fails, God punishes him severely. So when you take a role like Donald Trump does as president and you screw it up, you're destined for eternal damnation. That's what people don't understand. The Bible tells you, you take these roles of leadership and you fail in this, a CEO of a corporation will burn in eternal hell. When you fail your organization, fail your people in that organization, you fail the organization, that means you failed the people in the organization, and you're destined to damnation. See, people don't understand. They think they're going to heaven. They don't understand how the Bible works, sanctification works. And the pastors and priests don't tell you correctly. And you think you can get away with these things, and you can't. So the mayor of Chicago and the crime and people being killed, and if they're not reducing it, like Michael Bloomberg had to implement stop and frisk in New York, and they did these checks with the police, would knock on criminals' doors telling them, we know who you are, we're watching you, and we'll give you a diversion program. But he reduced crime significantly. And if you're not driving down crime and keeping crime down, and crime ticks up, and you don't respond, as a mayor, government official, you burn in hell. See, you shouldn't have taken the job in the first place. So Mayor Richard M. Daley, Sr., he's burning in hell. He's not in heaven. Junior, possibility of him burning in hell if he doesn't repent and help cleanse everything that was evil from his administration, making future administrations doing it right. That's repentance and atonement. So it's very difficult. So if you're a king of Saudi Arabia or the EAU or any of these places, United Arab Emirates, it doesn't matter. When you take this responsibility like Kim Jong-un and you do things incorrectly, you burn in hell. See, the Muslims don't understand. We're Abrahamic religions. And they think they can do these things, but they can't do these things. And they will be condemned for their failures. So they don't have this, and they need a come to Jesus moment, but a come, since they don't, the Jews and Muslims don't recognize, they have to have a come to God moment. Say, or they would say a come to Muhammad moment in the Muslim religion, or maybe a come to David moment in the Jewish religion, come to Moses or come to David. And so this reckoning and atonement and repentance. So these people think, and as you get wealth, and I put it out there, the Bible judges you on your stewardship. Now you're given this, what do you do with your money? And it does matter. And again, it's very complicated in life. It's easy, and this is why they say the meek will inherit the earth. Because these people didn't have the responsibilities, and from that, they didn't end up doing these misdeeds and end up being put in eternal damnation. So sometimes it's good to be the meek. If you can't handle the responsibility and do it proficiently, and when you make a mistake, you repent and atone and fix it, then you're up deep shit. And this is why I laugh when people go to church and I don't understand the pastoral staff, priests and pastors and nuns and elders and deacons and that, and they don't convey this correctly. And these people think, you know, these vitamin companies, these pharmaceutical companies and that, when they have people dying on their drugs and they don't do the right things, they think they're skating like Ford with the Pinto. Those people never made it to heaven. Those people just burn in hell, from the accountants to the leadership. So all these people think people are in heaven. Heaven is very difficult to obtain. And they don't understand, and all these people think their relatives are sitting in heaven. More than likely they perished or sitting in hell, not in heaven. So you have to understand this. So getting back to it, I'll go in and show you this, but this system can be a two-way system. And the CVS stores need to use their camera systems and that and network between them so they get comprehensive coverage, so people can't steal stuff in one store and hit another CVS and hit another CVS and hit another CVS. And they need to do this on a global basis like Walmart does and Target does. So these people can't go and hit other locations. They do this with bank robberies or armored car. They hit it here, then they go to another location, and the systems don't communicate, they don't talk, they don't share information. And so the people within the systems, the security officers and everything else, don't. It's just like we created Homeland Security because our local law enforcement doesn't interact with our county, doesn't interact with our state, doesn't interact with our federal. We don't interact with Interpol on an international basis. And then the CIA doesn't interact with Interpol. And then the NSA doesn't, and so on. And all these systems aren't talking to each other. All these government intelligence agencies like British MI5 and so on, which we got a bunch of intel from foreign intelligence agencies before 9/11 that something big was going to happen in America. The CIA and NSA and, FBI should have been brought in the loop, and they failed to pass it from the CIA to the FBI because it's on domestic soil. They need to transition the information to the FBI and other domestic agencies to do the field work. So we failed, and that's why Homeland Security was supposed to make this a seamless interaction. And this is why I watch American Greed and watch it, and the criminals move from this community to this community to this community to this community to this community. And they have no idea. So if it communicated and you moved in an area or you lived in an area, like say John Wayne Gacy, or take Ted Bundy, he moved around. So Ted Bundy was in this area, people got killed. Then Ted Bundy moved to this area, people got killed. Then Ted Bundy was in this area, people got killed. License plate readers. And so the system talks to each other, and the AI can do hundreds of trillions of calculations per second and correlate that this car was in this location and somebody got kidnapped. This car was in this location and somebody disappeared. Or this person was in this location, somebody disappeared. And then this person was in this location, somebody disappeared. And this system has to talk internationally because I told you pedophiles, they were never here in the United States. The smart ones, they went overseas to Thailand, as an example, as the one that I outed, that my friend John brought up to me, that we helped to take down in a way. But he never did anything illegal on U.S. soil. He went to Thailand to do all the pedophilia, and then he came back to the United States. Never did anything on U.S. soil. That's why it says you can't go to other countries and break the law. And so, again, these things happen, and we need to stop it because they go to other countries to do things, even satanic rituals. We had U.S. citizens in Mexico that went to Mexico to do satanic rituals, then come back to the United States, not doing things on U.S. soil, going off U.S. soil, doing these things where the law enforcement can't track, they're weak, and then they come back to U.S. soil, and they're like your great next door neighbor. But you don't know, every time they leave the country, they do horrible things, and then they come back home and they're great people. And so that's the wolf in sheep's clothing. And so we have to stop this type of thing, that people leave this country and do wicked things and come back to this country and are perfect with inside this country and seem like they're great citizens. They have no record or anything else, but they go overseas and they do horrible things, or across the border and do horrible things, and come back to this country and they look like great people. Like the huge pedophile ring caught in Canada. How many U.S. citizens were involved going over to Canada, doing its stuff, and then coming back to the United States and looking like, I'm just an innocent, good Joe or good female. I don't do anything wrong. No, you're the wolf in sheep's clothing, and you just don't do it where we detect it. So again, you can't get around making the UN very ethical and be able to work and track people's actions across border where they do very bad things in other countries. Let me take you to Mexico, Cancun. These kids from New Jersey got in a fight in Cancun, destroyed a bar. Now, they paid for it and everything. They went to jail and everything. But does that record of incarceration for destroying private property and everything and the damages in that, does that from Mexico end up in the U.S. records? They did it. And they came back to the U.S. and it doesn't track. It doesn't go with them. We have to have criminal records that follow the person from country to country. The record now is tagged on the person, and if you go to Canada, the record goes with you. You go to anywhere, the record follows you. So credit bureaus can do this, and credit bureaus should get into the criminal record business. Oh yes, credit bureaus should be getting into the criminal record business. And now, through the credit bureaus, their offshoot doing criminal records, you can get the credit history and the criminal history on somebody together. And credit bureaus have to get into it, but it needs to travel with you across border. So if I go from the United States to Saudi Arabia, I didn't do anything yet in Saudi Arabia, but my criminal history comes up so the Saudi Arabians know who they're dealing with. Has a history of armed robbery or pedophilia or sexual violence or domestic violence or whatever it may be. But your criminal record has to follow you everywhere in the world now. And we need legitimate governments that are highly ethical as you share this information, and they need to know, because they become the wolf in sheep's clothing as they move in another country, as OJ was running to Mexico. Same point. He wanted to cross the border, so that would be left in the United States, and he would be sipping cocktails on the beach in Mexico. So now the criminal record has to follow you globally. Like we have students coming in from China, we need to know their criminal background. The Chinese government has to share their criminal record with us. We get students from India. We need to know their criminal record, if they have any, and we need to verify the source of funds. Where's the money coming from? How can Kim Jong-un get educated, say, in the United States, when the money is coming from illegal sources? An educational institution like in Great Britain, they kicked out a whole family because in a country in Africa, they were deemed stealing money from the state, and it was an illegitimate government in Great Britain exiled the family, kicking them out, and I think kicking them out of school as well, because they can't have them get an education and pay for it with, say, cartel money. So, like Sicario, the cartel, the girl whose father is a cartel member, who has in a private school, paying the private school with cartel money, that girl can't go to that school. And secondly, if you're a cartel member and they have kids, the Department of Child and Family Services in, say, Mexico needs to take away those children. Bin Laden can't have children. Meaning all these people like Bin Laden have all these children. They need to be taken away from them. They can't mentor them and raise them. So we need to have this stuff across border communication, and we need to have highly ethical governments, and we can't have this bullshit. Countries don't have to like each other, but they must follow an ethical code that is global. And that's the point of the United Nations. It's a code that is ethical between leadership that they have to follow no matter what. Even if they hate the other country, they must follow these things of reciprocity, like sharing criminal records and protecting each other. Just because you don't like them, like Cuba did to us, they dumped all their freaking murderers, rapists, and serious criminals, cartel members or drug dealing, vicious gangs, and they dumped them on us. They dumped everything on us. The boat people came in and they just flooded in and they dumped everything, and we had the cocaine cowboys and incredibly violence throughout Florida and the East Coast and that, because they just empty their prisons. So when prisoners get out in El Salvador and they get a visa and come to the United States, do we know their criminal record in El Salvador? Were they a member of MS-13? This needs to be shared between countries. So this is why we have to have this overarching moral and ethical umbrella, which is called the United Nations, and it must function, and people that are in it must be highly ethical. Just because you don't like another country, like, say, Iran hates Israel, you still have to act ethically. And you must follow certain chains of conduct for your your disagreements. There are chains of conduct. And we need to start developing this better and holding. These people are moving around as they take flights, as cruise ships and planes and trains and bullet trains, and everything moves faster. It's like the serial killer in Pakistan who killed over 100 children. He just used the trains. He took trains from one town to another and then left the town, and they were looking for somebody in a certain town. In each of these towns, they were looking for the bad guy in the town. The bad guy left. He went there, got off the train, got a child, raped the child, molested, killed the child, and then got back on the train and left and didn't come back. And he killed over 100 children throughout Pakistan using the rail. And hard to catch because he never kills anyone in his town. So I don't know how they stumbled across him, if they caught him in action in that. But they had no idea. Because just like I have mafia figures that live on the North Shore, they never do any criminal activity around their house. They do it outside of where they live. So they never have it around them. So they can be this good neighbor and good person in the community. But outside the community, they're doing horrible things. Like not here in Illinois, doing horrible things in Vegas or other places, and they look like an upstanding citizen here. or they're doing it somewhere else in the world. And you think they're such good people, and they're using sweat labor somewhere else in the world. And so this shit has to stop. But I'll show you the system. I'm going to go in now. But we need to move to a higher state. So and I'll just keep this on for a second when I'm walking in the store. But see these things right here as I'm walking in? They're right and left of me. These are, for me, preventing me from taking stuff out of the store, but not bringing in weapons or anything into the store, is it? But it can be a two-way system. Stopping the video.